we will see large numbers of poor people, and specifically blacks, going to jail and to prison, and they will not have a chance.
What if I told you that there was more to the crack era than what the white mainstream news media had let on, and that it went beyond black and Latinx people that simply needed to kick a drug habit? This project began with the question: what did the crack and cocaine epidemic mean for families and communities in inner city populations, suburban areas, and more? Although my exposure to the crisis was not immediate, I wanted to understand more, and I knew for this research the first step was to ask more personally and not only research headlining articles. In my life, exposure to drugs was not in my upbringing, but in later years when the acknowledgement to where drugs have taken place in my family had shown itself. Visibly, the epidemic shaped inner cities like Philadelphia or Maryland, and to my help, I reached out to two people whose lives and perspectives reflect different sides of this history. Olivia, who grew up in Baltimore, and Ramon, who lived in Philadelphia, that I will refer to as my Uncle June.
The most thing that I remember about South Kensington growing up was the diversity in the neighborhood. Okay. It was a very mixed neighborhood, middle class neighborhood. So back then, you did have issues. It was visible, as visible as I wanted it to be, because you were still rooted by whatever upbringing you had. Mid 80s was the cocaine era. So cocaine was a very prominent with people with money. If you had money, it was, yeah. Only people that had money bought cocaine, right? It was a high stimulant. It was a party drug. And back then, people snorted it, right?
Right.
And then people freebased it. It's called freebase. Mm-hmm. That's when they cooked it. They smoked it, right? Again, only people with a lot of money could do that.
Right.
Right. And it was maybe in the late 80s, beginning of the 90s, that crack came out. Okay. My parents didn't allow me to associate with that type of crowd.
Okay.
That was taboo. You didn't touch it. But unfortunately, I walked into that crowd. And I was teased a lot because I was very spoiled. My parents, my dad really spoiled. I started to notice I was being isolated. I wasn't being part of the fun in the neighborhood. As I got older, I demanded respect. So the only, and the way that respect came back then was fear.
Yeah.
So I started to hang out with people that made a lot of illegal noise.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Who in the neighborhood, they were feared, but respected.
Yeah. Do you think that was like an armor of protection almost?
Absolutely.
From the opposition point?
Absolutely.
That makes sense.
Yeah. It wasn't until high school that I really set my mark. I was the first freshman to make varsity baseball. I was really, really good. I was at a level of playing baseball that I could have went professional. And then I got hurt.
Oh.
It like derailed my whole career. And then my girlfriend got pregnant. So senior year was really crazy. Our parents, they didn't play that.
Did y'all end up getting married?
Yeah, and I got married at 18 years old. That changed the perspective and things. Now I had to find a financial way to
Right.
to bring in a kid. So here's the door of opportunity of selling drugs.
Growing up in West Baltimore with about 10, 11 family members in one house.
Yep. It was cool. Like it wasn't, like bad. Nobody was starving. We had clothes. We had shoes. You know what I'm saying? Well, biologically, I had one sibling. My cousins was from biological and like marriages. They were aunts, uncles, cousins. You know what I mean? So it just was just like my grandma. She was just like the big mama of the family. Everybody going through whatever. You go to Big Mama house.
You described crackhead trafficking.
Yeah, it was just a high volume of crackheads around in the area.
Like foot traffic.
Yeah, they in the streets walking. You know what I mean? I ended up being there because my mom and dad were using drugs, and I didn't know that they were even using drugs at the time. It was just always something going on to keep us like occupied, so we didn't even have time to even like miss our parents. My granddad would put us in the back of the pickup truck and take us around, driving around the city. We stopping at 7-Eleven getting hot dogs, nachos. You know what I mean? I didn't start missing my mom until I got older. My dad, he still made it his business to even come see us. I was 7. It wasn't until my father, when I asked him, this was after I had turned my 8th birthday, and I asked him, where's my mom? Because to my knowledge, my mother told me that I was just going to live with my dad for a weekend. Mm-hmm. Well, not live with him, but visit him for a weekend. Mm-hmm. And that whole weekend, he was calling, she ain't answering, and that's when he just told me, like, yeah, your mom, she not in the right spot right now. She not in the right frame of mind. She's using drugs, and she's just not, her process of thinking is just not there to even be thinking about you, so you will not go back with her.
Yeah.
When I would be outside, like on the front, I would see my mom drive past with her then husband at the time, and she would lean back in the car so that I couldn't see her, but I had already saw you. We have had like the conversation with her, like apologizing and stuff. So I was able to like forgive her and move past it. You know what I mean? And just understand, like, I know that probably wasn't you just deliberately not wanting to be with your children. It was because you were on drugs, and that shit takes over your body. You know what I'm saying? So you're more of an adult longer than you are a child, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like, with all that being said, with the relationship, I would rather continue my relationship with my mom and not hold any grudges. And not,
Tell them what you saw, and that's why you moved out of Baltimore.
It was like a popular hairstylist that lived in Baltimore. She was from Baltimore.
Okay.
And she had her hair salon was probably like 2 or 3 blocks away from where I was living. Like I said, Baltimore, they have a lot of drug dealers, and they don't care if that's your business establishment. They will literally set up shop right there.
Oh.
So she would call the police because she would ask them, like, to, can they move from her front, because this is a place of business. Don't nobody want to keep having to push past y'all, because y'all right here selling drugs, playing dice, y'all doing whatever. And she would call the cops on them. And one night, she had her daughter, I guess she was like cleaning up, after a day's work, she was cleaning up, getting her shopping ready for the next day. And she had her 4-year-old daughter with her. And somebody came in her establishment and shot her in the head right in front of her daughter. And that just, that was it for me. I mean, I'm just like, really, like, y'all have no respect. Like, I cannot stay in the city. I've lived here 30 years of my life, and it's just too much. To double back with my mom, what I had learned that why she started drugs was because she was trying to get thoughts out of her head, right? The guy that she was messing with introduced her to those drugs. And because my mom, she witnessed my grandmother, which is her mom, her biological mom, she witnessed her being murdered, right? So as she explained and like how she got hooked and all that, it was just like, damn, like, shit, I would be doing hard drugs too if I witnessed that. You know what I mean? It's just like you don't never really know like a person's reason as to why something is happening or they are the way they are. And I was just saying, like, just to remember to have like grace with people, you know.
You talked about the response the society had to this issue, quite different from what we're seeing now with the opioid crisis.
Well, that's right. During the response to the crack epidemic was increased enforcement. President George H.W. Bush held a nationally televised address from the White House in which he declared a war on drugs, specifically on crack cocaine. And the whole mindset at that time was to try to arrest. The authorities wanted to try to arrest their way out of the problem, arrest dealers, users, and as a result, there was that gave a great boost to the move toward mass incarceration, which was already in flux at that time.
Obviously, and you talk about the response to this issue. Do you see it as a different response to the opioid addiction problem as opposed to the crack?
It's a starkly different response. The reaction to the opioid issue has been, on the part of policymakers and many others, has been to treat this as a public health issue. To the people who are addicted are viewed as people who have a medical problem, which is true, and who need help and treatment and rehabilitation. And that's not. There wasn't a whole lot of talk about that during the crack epidemic.
And the ethnicity of the users between the two?
Well, certainly another reason that a lot of people have pointed to is that the crack epidemic was associated with Black and Latino addiction, whereas most of the addicts who are falling prey to opioids are whites. Now it's hitting a lot of whites in suburban and rural areas. And in fact, we have some very specific examples. Chris Christie, the New Jersey governor, has talked very movingly about the drug issue. He has talked about a close friend who fell victim to opioid addiction. I think that it's easier for people in power, politicians, to empathize with someone who reminds them of themselves. What we are seeing today are probably a greater number of deaths, though, from overdoses, opioid overdoses. Just last year, in 2016, the preliminary federal figures show that about 64,000 deaths from opioid overdoses.
I worked under the mayor during his term, the 8-year term, and unfortunately, I lost my son to the same thing that I was trying to, help people with.
Yeah.
And that changed the trajectory of my life. I felt like the system failed my son. The same system that I worked for. I remember I worked in the behavioral health system. So now the treatment was tailored to the white man. And I'll tell you why I say that is, even now it's like this. So if you do cocaine or crack, you get detox for 2 days and get a 15-day treatment, 10 to 15 days.
Okay.
Where the opiate, you get a week of detox and get 30 to 90 days
Oh, wow.
of treatment with, on the back end, some housing, some stability afterwards. So with the crack, and it's still today, like if you're on stimulants, you don't get yourself together. It's a mental thing. Where opiates is a physical thing. One of the things that I remember was, I never forget this, before my son died, he was very proud of me. He, the trajectory of my life. And he was proud to be my son. And I don't want to take that away. I want to continue to do the work because I know that he was proud of me.
For social thinkers who are either not of the culture or too young to these movies and possibly other media coverages are the closest thing to understanding what the street economy looked like, including the hustle, the danger, the fast money, and emotional bridges like ego, identity, and pride. What's striking is that both of my interviewees mentioned the films, showing just how memorable visual adaptations can be. While the films were able to show parts of the world they recognized, its interpretation can be detrimental to the real lives who endure what others can only interpret through screen. So what can this mean for an anthropologist? As we've seen, malpractice media will tailor to a narrative that focuses on drama or the chase scenes or the outlet. What gets lost are the structures and conditions that made these necessary. Drugs became the blame for all the conditions that the society had allowed to fester or were unwilling to confront. Authorities, parents, health officials, media outlets, and general aggrandized behavior had a hand in what led a demographic of people to devastation and generational trauma. More importantly, the people's stories in which these realities come from, the jobless, redlining, policing, addiction, and the ways entire black and brown communities were already economically disadvantaged, but now abandoned with lack of community and access. Anthropology asks us to slow down these narratives, to ask questions about why these events happen, and not only look for the surface inquiry of what happened. It is important for public coverages to be real about how the people affected lived inside those realities every single day. Since films about the drug trade are so influential, anthropologists must be careful not to reproduce stereotypes, flatten narration, or the criminality of people without context. Media often compress whole ways of life, which, if misrepresented, can harmfully essentialize the entirety. Culture is negotiated, contradictory, and ever-changing. With importance, please take care of this within historical fiction, crime dramas, documentaries, and every genre.